If you are white and live in the United States, you're probably a racist. I am. Most people don't want to be racist, but science has proven that most white people have an implicit bias against people of color. In fact, since you were a very young white person, you were fed negative stereotypes. Good guys wear white hats, bad guys wear black hats, and on and on. That's why implicit racial bias is built into our society. That's why unarmed black men are shot by police more often than unarmed white men. It's why the white guy gets the job over a black person with the same qualifications. Even if you say, I voted for Obama, or I have lots of black friends, yep, you're probably still racist, because your subconscious has trained you to be that way. And if you're asking yourself the question, am I a racist? You probably are. And if you say, I'm not a racist, you most certainly are. Here's how I discovered I was a racist.
All right, Token, give me a smooth bass line.
I don't know how to play bass.
Token, how many times do we have to go through this? You're black, you can play bass.
I'm getting sick of your stereotypes.
Be as sick as you want, just give me a goddamn bass line.
God damn it.
That's right, all black people do not play the bass, but that hasn't stopped me from thinking it and occasionally asking. So stop asking yourself, am I a racist? And start asking, what can I do to stop the racism I see in the world? And get off my lawn.
Hello. Now, recently, there's been a great debate, and it has been highly politicized as to what white children can sustain, what they can learn that won't make them feel bad. Ignoring the history of Black children being spat upon, threatened, placed in bodily harm, and having to be escorted by the National Guard into schools. Talking about actual history has some white parents shook up because they don't want Rebecca and Bobby to feel bad. Or is it they don't want Rebecca and Bobby to connect the dots as to what they're being taught at home? Or they don't want them to open up a book and see that mommy, daddy, mama, and papa were a part of those crowds saying despicable things to children. Not much older, not much younger than they may be right now. A white man decided to weaponize a collegiate legal course, CRT, critical race theory, in order to push the notion of charter schools. And historically, there are white families that will go along with it because they will cut their foot off to spite their entire body. There was a period of time where different school systems completely shut down. No one was being educated because they didn't want to share classrooms with non-white people. So when you look at certain people within generations and you're like, how do they not know this? How do they not know how this works? They weren't ever taught, then you have a portion of the country that is so ingrained within the curriculum set forth by the Daughters of the Confederacy, who intentionally infantilized the Civil War, even rebranding it to the War of Northern Aggression. And that brings me to a series of videos that were sent to me due to a discussion that was had in a classroom. Now, everyone's focus is on the default members of society. How will they feel? But do you actually think about how non-white students feel in classrooms when the only bits and pieces of their history you want to teach, and I'm using that very lightly, are ones of struggle and ones where someone can input a white savior? And also the the conversation of indoctrination has made its rounds yet again in the United States. But let's go piece by piece through this conversation in the classroom and take a look at who's actually being indoctrinated and what are the detriments to continue to teach falsified history and to uphold it, and the benefits of finally telling the truth. Here we go.
Why do you fight like a terrifier or whatever?
I'm not saying that.
Okay, so I'll take that as a yeah. Okay. All right. So why do you fight like a terrifier or whatever?
I'm not saying that.
Okay, so I'll take that as a yeah. Okay. All right. So why do you fight the flag? Because of what you said earlier, that you can only push me so far, blah 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 blah. What does it like represent when you put it on your car or put it in front of your house or wherever you put it?
It represents you can only push me so far. I have a Gadsden flag sticker on my car, which is Revolutionary one, the yellow one with the snake.
Yeah.
I think that they're very similar. You can only push me so far.
Georgia, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna say about what Mike said. He was just talking about how, you know, there were certain things that like he wanted to associate with the flag, but you can't really like only associate like your Southern heritage with the flag. You have to like associate everything. You have to go with the Southern heritage. You have to go with the slavery. You have to go with seceding, and like you can't, you know, take part of the flag and say this is what I'm for. You have to go for all of it.
Well, I mean, you can't take parts of the, you know, free speech and say only if it doesn't offend me.
Okay.
You can't do that. You
Right. Yes, sir. And then I'll come back to you.
Well, people in the South, like, I feel like they've recognized that people may see it as it represents racism, but it just represents their whole culture as a whole. Like, they accept all of that. They accept that happened in the past, but they're not, like, that was their heritage. That's what happened in, like, their ancestors and all that. So they're going to keep that as, like, their family heritage.
And to your statement, sir, then what do you say to Southern blacks who want to represent their heritage? How do they feel about that flag? Why don't they fly?
Well, because it might have affected them in a negative way, but it could have also affected a bunch of people, not just necessarily blacks, but everyone in a negative way. So it should be a free choice whether you want to fly it or not.
Mr. Yost?
You know, like as Georgia was saying, we have to look at every aspect of the flag. And she mentioned slavery and stuff. She didn't mention the unfair treatment by the North, and also the I keep blanking out. It was wait. I had something I was going to say.
But I think so.
She said in schools what we're taught, like everyone knows history is written by the victors, so we're taught to focus on the slavery. I think if the other side would have won, then absolutely we'd be focusing on, we'd look at this North poorly.
And I probably wouldn't be. I probably wouldn't be teaching you if the South would have won. I'd probably be chilling somewhere else. All right.
Can I have like 3 examples of what else the Civil War was about that was not slavery?
Now, before we go on to the next clip, there is a lot a lot to unpack here. You can only push me so far. During the antebellum period, who was pushing white people? See how historically within this country, white people have a habit, a tradition, if you will, of turning themselves into the victim when their behavior is able to be widely and openly criticized. Then let's go on to the gentleman that was standing up against the wall that is biracial. His parents are doing him a disservice. The people around him are doing him a disservice. He's fighting for perspective that upholds hate and a racial hierarchy. And unfortunately, he doesn't realize that. He's acting as if it was the rivalry football game on Friday night. You know, this perspective, they may have felt that they were treated fairly. And this perspective, they may have felt, no. There's no differing perspectives when it comes to owning, breeding, beating, experimenting on a race of people. There is no the other side suffered too. How? You had white people who used pseudo-religion and pseudoscience to dehumanize Black people, treat them as livestock on the farm. Beat them not just for the sake of profitability, but beat them because they were also attracted to them. Then you have the gentleman that's like, well, history is written by the victors. You know, nobody talks about the North being mean to the South. The North had slaves as well. The North just diversified its industries, where the South remained solely dependent on plantational slavery. Diversifying your use of enslaved people is not being mad at the South. And eventually, the North began to get it in their head that, you know, these people are going to keep jumping over these hurdles. These people are picking up on the fact that, oh, they can use the legal system to get out of slavery. They can use this, they can use that. And that's why they began to invoke gradual abolition, which was a joke. It was good on paper. It looks real pretty on paper. But in reality, it was just an extension of slavery, no different than the 13th Amendment. The owning of bodies is American as extreme patriotism. But let's move to the next clip.
Can I have like 3 examples of what else the Civil War was about that was not slavery?
Oh.
Okay, yeah, it is, because that's what the Confederate flag was
I think so far we've had a pretty good discussion. All right, so there's no reason to get out of control.
I mean, I just feel like that's a legitimate question since the Confederate flag came from the Civil War. I feel like that's a legitimate question. What else does it stand for? Like, what specific states' rights issues are you talking about? And, like, how do you feel like you're being pushed? In what ways are you being pushed that you feel the need to fly the Confederate flag? Like, personally.
Mandated by the government.
Okay, like, in what instance?
Give it to them, let's go. Well, well, if we want to talk about how states' rights and how all this stuff, you want to have freedom in what you believe in, right?
Okay, like specifically though.
Specifically, okay. So, not everyone is entitled to health care, but yet we think that everyone is entitled to health care. Not everyone is entitled to slavery because we got rid of that, right?
What?
Hold on. It's the same thing. Back in the South, Southerners thought that slavery was their right. Now we think that health care is our right.
So you're likening slavery to Obamacare?
Well, we're talking about we're talking about big government and we're talking about states' rights. You can compare the two.
Okay.
We're talking about what was moral then and now.
Like maybe in 100 years.
Wait, let's go, Raymond.
Okay, so
Listen up.
I think what I'm getting from what Hayden said was that slavery was okay because they thought it was moral, but slavery was never moral. And so you linking someone to be able to go to the hospital and being able to afford their cancer treatment has nothing to do with slavery being okay back in the South.
And owning people.
Owning people will never be okay. And so I feel like when you said that you'll only take parts of the flag, of the Confederate flag, you forget that like it also acknowledges the fact that slavery is okay. And so I feel like if you say that someone's pushing you, like who exactly is pushing you? Just like Drake, like who are you, who's pushing you? Like who? How is the government pushing you? What are they doing to Drake?
Obamacare.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Is Obamacare directly affecting you?
And this brings us to indoctrination. So you're telling me, because did you catch it? A class full of minors who aren't paying bills for themselves, are not participating in our election practices as of yet, well, at the time of this, had such a negative reaction to being asked to give 3 examples of what the Civil War was about that did not include slavery. As they kept saying that slavery wasn't the only thing. What about the aggression from the North? That was the perfect time to say, you know what? The North was doing this, 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 and this, and this is why we did. It immediately went to a conservative GOP talking point, Obamacare, and how, well, you think healthcare is a right. It is, and it's beneficial to society as a whole. As my daddy always says, you don't live to yourself and you don't die to yourself, no matter how much you try. Your productivity or lack thereof does affect society. We are all cogs within one machine. And he equated healthcare to owning slaves. And then they also love that tagline of big government. They have a problem with big federal government. They have no problem with big local government, even if you bring it up to date. They have no problem with states telling you exactly what you can do with your body, with your children. They have a problem with the federal government doing it. And this is because you have politicians on the federal level who are dripping in privilege and are a part of the elites, lying to these people, no different than music artists do when they want to pander to the lowest common denominator in society, claiming that they got it out the mud just like them. Because if you're not focused on the federal government can screw you 10 ways to Sunday. And they don't mind the overreach of local government, because when they have that mindset, they have their buddies in those seats. And this is why I chuckle when all these parents are claiming that teachers are indoctrinating their kids and you got to watch what they're teaching them. Anyone who's been around children and anyone who's honest with themselves about their own childhood, what sticks with you the most, what resonates with children the most, is what they learn outside of school from those that they believe they are close to, those that they believe that they can trust, their parents, their grandparents, their aunts, uncles, those cousins that they love. Doesn't matter what the teacher says. Doesn't matter what facts the teachers present. Because if they can go home and go, Mom, Miss Jeffrey said blah, blah, blah. And mom goes, yeah, you know she's wrong. You know, we know. Hence the fact that in a school, in a classroom, a lot of these answers are not educationally based. They're not fact-based. They're based upon talking points. And this is also why I say stop banking on the silent and boomer generations dying out and you believing that racism will die out with it. Stop acting like these people didn't procreate and have been hermits from start to finish. Let's go on to the next clip.
How is the government pushing you? What are they doing to Drake?
Obamacare.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. Is Obamacare directly affecting you?
Wait, I want to hear you. Hey, Lydia.
I think, honestly, I think like if you ever take a history class, they tell you that this part of our history is like a shameful part, and I think it should be left in the past because it's kind of irrelevant now. And I mean, if you want to like fight for your freedom, that's great, but you don't have to do that here in public because obviously it's going to cause more problems. Like, than if you were just to fly it at home. Like, that's your freedom of speech, it's your right, but like in a public process.
We got a kid right here with the white hat on his hand for a long time.
I have 3 questions for the Miss in the Green. What is your name, first
Isabel.
off? Okay, Isabel, do you pledge allegiance to the American flag?
I mean, yeah.
Okay. Do you know
Let him finish.
Do you know that when we left Britain to come over here, we took land from the American Indians?
Yeah, I do know that.
And do you know that also that the flag that we fly also kind of stands for hatred, and that we took land from other people, and that we've been living in land that technically wasn't ours to take? So why are you only holding partial facts? Why are you only holding facts to the partial facts to the Southern flag when people fly this for freedom and they don't also fly it for people stealing from the Indian? You fly that flag every day for freedom, but we can't because it only stands for slavery in your mind.
I don't take my flag and go on Indian reservations and wave it around and be like, look what I stand for. I don't do that. Okay, I don't do that. What Drake does and what all of you who wave the Confederate flag in front of any African American students at East, you're condoning that and you're openly telling them that you accept the racism that they have faced and continue to face by you. I know all of you that make fun of the we too are East thing, all of you do that. I hear you do it. It is absurd. And for you to sit here and be like, it's okay because of states' rights and try to condone your own racist actions is absurd. Like, that is so ridiculous. And you can sit there and laugh at me, Drake, but you are being bigoted. And I think, like, the general American population that, like, is actually educated would agree with that. Maybe not all of us here at Shawnee Mission East that live in this bubble, but, like, I'm sorry that you're going to continue.
Kudos to that last young lady, because the most important thing that she said, maybe not all of us who live here in this bubble. And you see how the one young man sitting on the floor, he kind of got it right. He's talking about the current United States flag. They say they fly for freedom, but everybody's not free, that they took land. But here's the thing. He brought Native Americans in, and my apologies, he did use the wrong term. But they don't think about the other people who live in this country, who keep this country moving, who were integral in the founding of this country, that flag doesn't represent. And she's absolutely correct that when you fly the Confederate flag, especially the battle flag that is flown now, it is a symbol of showing non-white people where we are not welcome, where we are not wanted. It is to be a reminder of that racial hierarchy. And another time that those that place themselves at the top of the hierarchy have to keep proving and beating their chest that they are superior. Now, when you have a superior product, you don't have to go out and tell everybody that it is superior. They know, they can tell the difference. Now, the young lady that was sitting crisscross applesauce on the floor talking about the First Amendment, first of all, the First Amendment is against the government, not against individual people. But how did she say, yes, you have the right to fight for your freedoms, but do it quietly and do it at home? The indoctrination. And you hear once again the room erupt because they think that they have a gotcha moment, saying, I can fly this flag. Even though historically, the generals of a nation that only lasted as long as we are going to be in high school, barring any failures, said to put away and never fly again, and never to erect any monuments in their honor. But those monuments started to be erected, and that flag came back out as a method of letting you know that when the sun goes down, you need to leave town. We don't want you around here. And see, the resurgence of the Confederate flag and the constructing of those monuments came hand in hand with that. If you don't like it, leave. So they thought they had something going when they set up Liberia to send us there after the Civil War. But too many of us were like, we've died, we've been separated, we've been bred, we've been raped, we've been pillaged of everything. You've stolen our innovations. You've stolen what we've had going on for generations at this point and slapped your name on it. Now you want to put us out of the country that we've even fought for? No ma'am, no ham, no Pam. So then the good old white folk had to figure out a way to remind the black folk, along with Jim Crow and black codes and redlining and blockbustering, where their place was to be. And then eventually white folks realized we really do need black folk, because we can start an invention, but we can't finish it. We can steal the idea, but we don't know what to do with it. And where would our creativity go? Let's go to the next clip.
All right, quiet down. I'll point on what Isabel said about flying the Confederate flag in front of any African American that sees it, and you were kind of using that to back off on the American flag and the Native Americans.
No, I didn't. I said I don't do that. So
No. But my point is, we fly the American flag everywhere. So any Native American that walks around, you're gonna see the American flag almost on a daily basis. So does that not represent your entire background? I'm just saying.
Let's go here. Yes, ma'am.
So the Native Americans. Okay. So the Native Americans used to use swastika as a peace symbol, and after World War II and everything that went on with Hitler, they realized that the swastika had a different connotation, so they stopped using it. Just like when you look at the Confederate flag, you realize that it doesn't have the connotation that the American flag does. When you see the Confederate flag, you think of slavery, and there's so many different symbols for Southern pride and freedom, but the fact that you choose the one that already has the negative connotation, like you could use any other symbol to represent freedom and like Southern pride or whatever you're trying to do with it. I really don't understand why you feel a need to throw it. And if it's like freedom of speech, like, I don't think that people really understand the freedom of speech, like, what it is. Because, like, when I'm saying don't wave your Confederate flag, like, the government isn't telling you to do that. I'm saying that, and I'm using my freedom of speech to argue against, like, I don't think that people understand.
I mean, you can't use your freedom of speech to argue against freedom of speech.
I mean, it's just
not
You say, oh, you shouldn't be allowed to fly your flag or whatever, but you're using the same right that we are using.
Can I ask
Classic indoctrinated white supremacy. Instead of sticking on topic and talking about how something is offensive to Black people, let's move it over and talk about how something else can be offensive to another marginalized community. Let's ignore the damage that is continuously done to Black people. And then I'm all for open dialogue, especially in schools. But see, having that open dialogue, you still have to be a teacher and you still have to come in. And the fact that they're throwing around free speech, and there's no correction, there is no, hey, this is what free speech actually is. And what you are doing is not void of consequences. And the conversation of impact over intent, but they know their impact, they know their intent. That's why they're fighting so hard with freedom of speech. Because if you realize, racists seem to only know 3 amendments, the first, the second, and the fifth, and don't really have a comprehensive grasp upon it. Because it's no more than talking points that they heard from somebody that gives them the goosies and the warm fuzzies on TV. Let's keep going.
Can I ask a specific question? Because we have obviously a lot of you in here who support the Confederate flag. In what way, on a personal level, do you feel tied to Southern heritage and what the Confederate flag represents?
I do not feel any.
I just want to know. I don't. So why do you fly the flag?
Yeah, because it's a symbol of you can't push me anymore.
Okay.
Let me say something real quick. No, I'm just because all right. I have a question. Let me, and then I'll come back to you. I have a wife from the South. My wife is from Memphis, where she sees the Confederate flag on a regular basis. And her question, when I told her about this conversation, she was like, "But they live in Kansas, and if they're gonna take."
Yeah, the South.
No, let me finish, Chris. It's my turn. It's my turn. I want to talk. Respect the argument. I want to talk. So,
Hey, quiet.
her argument. Killing me, son. We're good. All right. So, her argument was that if they're gonna take Southern heritage, they gotta take all of Southern heritage. You can't just represent one part of Southern heritage and say, well, this part over here, I don't represent that. Right? Just like we're saying we have to represent the entire of the American flag and what it's representing now and what it's evolved to represent. So what has the Confederate flag evolved to represent now that is so relevant to your somewhat privileged Prairie Village life?
I mean, I have never supported the Confederate flag. I don't own one. I don't fly one. I'm supporting the right to do it.
Okay.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yes, sir.
I think that this conversation has turned into whether or not you can fly the flag as to why people do fly the flag. And I think under the First Amendment, pretty much you're right, whether it be good or not,
Absolutely.
you can fly the flag.
Yeah.
And to argue against why people fly the flag, that's kind of their belief. And I think debating about it is never going to change the way they feel, because obviously it's a minority opinion among most Americans. And they feel I think they feel backed into a corner, and whether or not aggressively arguing that they're wrong isn't going to change their opinion. And I think that this debate has shown how heated it gets, and that it's a controversial opinion in the United States. And I don't think that's going to change for a while. And I think it just takes time.
Yeah. And he makes a good point, because whether we like it or disagree or not, you do have a right to fly that flag, and you do have a right to wear the flag. You can even wear it at East. The administration and the district has said that you have a right to fly the flag and wear the flag as long as it doesn't disrupt whatever is going on.
These kids, they are being taught the playbook line by line. When asked what was their connection, I don't have a connection. Then take a breath. What means you can't push me too far? Push you too far from what? Because you said that it was heritage. Now it's don't push you too far. See how it's their beliefs and it's their heritage, but they want to separate themselves from the heritage when called out. Then there was a disrespect from the student. And you get a chance to see what he believes his heritage is. And that heritage is still having ownership of Black bodies, regardless of the age. And then the final young man, that is a huge chunk of society. And that is a lot of white people throughout history. Well, talking about it, it just raises tensions. It's not going to get any better if we talk about it. It just takes time. How is time going to heal or fix anything when you don't address it? I would love to know where this mythical time is that comes in and swoops and makes everything better when no one addresses anything. Every time there is something that makes people uncomfortable, because that discomfort comes from having to look within and admit that they are wrong. All of a sudden it's let's not talk about it. You can't change their mind. Just it'll get better in time. Just give it time. Just give it time. Everybody is not built for everything. Even if you look at the civil rights era, everybody was not an orator. Everybody was not at protest. But everybody had a part to play to move things forward. There were litigators. There were educators. There were people who handled transportation. There were people who cooked, people who watched the children, people who raised funds for bail, people who provided emergency housing when homes were burned and bombed and everything else. Even going back further to the Underground Railroad, everybody wasn't a conductor. Some people provided transport. Some people provided information. Some people were merely a stop along the way. Some people provided papers so folks could get through. So if it's too much for you to stand on the front line, fine. Fine. But stop telling people to sit back and be quiet and be comfortable in bullshit. Because when change is accomplished, you'll be the first one to puff out your chest and say, we did it. We didn't do shit because you stood in the way and told us to be quiet and told the line and stay with status quo. Look at what's happening in this classroom. Sitting quietly. As the self-proclaimed opposition is arming their children with the tools to continue to oppress us, does what? Not having the conversations because you're tired and you're worn down. Guess what? Your brother is dead. Your sister just lost her baby because they didn't want to pay her any attention in the hospital. Your children can't go out and play because the cops see them as targets. You are now falling into the trap of white supremacy, into that comfort zone that you're putting yourself into so that you can have adjacency to that top tier of the racial hierarchy. You're putting yourself into that comfort zone that all you have to endure is the conversation, and you're tired of the conversation. See, white folk get to have the privilege of just being tired of having the conversation, of being over the conversation and being able to go, la, 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 I can't hear you. Black, brown, indigenous people of color not only have to have the conversation, but we got to live the conversation every second of every minute of every hour of every day. And I don't care how many conversations it has. I don't care how many times I got to speak up. You will hear me and you will know that me and my skin folk, we matter. We are human. We're not going to sit back and wait and hope and pray that your hate goes away. Because the moment we get silent, we are now complying. We are now giving them the opportunity to tell their children, see, we were right about them all along. You ain't got to change nothing. See, we were right. It's no different than a Karen at a store or a restaurant. You let them bully the employee into giving them something for free. Every time you see them, they're going to do it, and they're going to up the damn ante. Because you don't correct these kids now, they'll be the next ones marching around saying Heil Hitler. They'll be the next ones to start Proud Boys 2.0, the next Oath Keepers, the next 3%ers, the next resurgence of the KKK. And just like members of all those groups, they'll, minus the KKK, they'll hide it from their families. They'll hide it from their friends. They'll try to distance themselves while all the while plotting your demise, because instead of working to get out of their mediocrity, they're working to steal from you and remove you. Let's go to the next part.
Makes a good point, because whether we like it or disagree or not, you do have a right to fly that flag, and you do have a right to wear the flag. You can even wear it at East. The administration in the district has said that you have a right to fly the flag and wear the flag as long as it doesn't disrupt whatever is going on. Okay, so, yes, sir.
I have a question for Ms. Holloway.
Okay.
All right. Let's not turn this back. Ms. Holloway, you said that if I take a history class here at East, I'll learn, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that?
Wait.
Let him get his backward views out.
Send him.
Ms. Holloway, do you think that the history teachers here at East are biased because the government that they're running on was the one who won? Because I talked to
that's the dumbest argument I've ever heard.
All right, okay. I talked to a 15.
Let him finish.
I talked to a 15-year military history teacher at Fort Leavenworth, and he said that the teachers are completely biased, and he told me the real story. And so do you think that what you've heard in the history classrooms at Shawnee Mission East are a little bit skewed from what really happened?
Okay, no, because like I asked you, and if you don't.
But do you know what really happened?
If I know, I asked you to tell me what really happened. I asked you to prove that the Civil War started beside slavery, and you couldn't do it. You just looked at me. So please tell me the whole story.
You said that before you were here.
Yeah, you came late.
Yeah, but
I'll give a rundown again if you want. You want me to?
Yeah.
Oh God, here we go. All right, so northern manufacturers, right?
Yeah.
In Britain, hang on. You got me laughing.
Let the man.
Go ahead.
All right, so Britain was selling their goods in America for lower prices than the North was, right?
Okay.
So the North had 5 times more population than the South. South's main exporter was cotton and tobacco. And so the South would make most of their money off shipping their cotton to Britain. And the North manufacturers, they made the tariff of 1825, which put an import and export tax on cotton, which would raise prices of northern goods, but it would hurt the southern economy because they would then tax the cotton that goes out to Britain. It was unconstitutional and unfair.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yes.
You said the 2 major crops were what?
Cotton and tobacco.
And how did they harvest them at a high level without prices being tested? Like, what was their main way of harvesting them?
Probably slavery. The cotton gin was.
How much did they pay the slaves?
Yes, during a time before we had income tax. And they always love to bring in that, oh, but Britain was so. Now I will say, I'm not a fan of the British government, okay? Especially not during this time. And the aristocracy, yeah, it burns my biscuits. But Britain wasn't the only people buying tobacco and cotton from the southern states. And yes, Britain was buying the cotton, turning it into textiles and fabrics, and shipping it back and selling it. But here's the thing, saying that, oh, we started this whole war because of attacks. Because you were not good business people and you wanted to be tyrannical. Because another great tradition of white people in the United States is claiming that they are fleeing oppression to input that oppression on other people, and then convincing people that they want to control to inflict that oppression on others, just to keep this circle of oppression going so nobody pays attention to what's going on at the top. But like I said, the South decided to get comfortable in plantational enslavement. That's why the South is still trying to rise and rebuild. But there's still more. Let's go.
Cotton and tobacco.
And how did they harvest them at a high level without prices being attached? Like, what was their main way of harvesting them?
Probably slavery. The cotton gin was.
How much did they pay the slaves? I'm just asking a question. I mean, if their main two crops were cotton and tobacco, and they used free labor, so they made a lot of profit off of it. This is just economics. Then how do you take out the fact that slavery was attached?
All right. Well, I have a question for Mr. Justice then.
You brought up an economics debate. Your argument was economics. If they made the majority of their profit off of free labor to be able to send out that cotton and that tobacco to everybody at a cheaper price and make a lot of profit because they don't have to pay the labor, then how can you detach the labor that did it?
Well, if we want to talk about labor, first of all...
Okay, if you can interrupt, then I can interrupt.
No, I'm gonna go first, though.
Okay, none of this matters.
Okay.
Again, to reiterate Katie's point, maybe that's what it used to stand for, but that's not what it stands for now. It's a symbol of racism. It's standing for a symbol of racism. If they're allowed to wear their Confederate flag, am I allowed to wear all my Nazi paraphernalia to school too?
Hey, let's hear.
You guys that are supporting it. No, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I just have a genuine question. If you were supporting it, and do you acknowledge that people are offended by it racially? Yes. Okay, so what do you have to say to the people that feel personally offended by the flag? Do you say F them, freedom of speech? Because that's a terrible moral compass to live by.
Say it to me. Well, say it to me. Say it to me. Yeah.
Okay, but there's a very large percentage of people in a population and demographic that agree that it is racial. I mean, obviously, there's both sides that agree that it's racially offensive. So do you just completely acknowledge it and say well, you know what, sucks, you guys, your history is slavery,
Last year, CNN took a poll across the entire nation. 57% of Americans said that the flag was not racist. That's a majority.
What you say to the people that are in this room that are personally offended by the flag?
I'm sorry that you're offended and you're misinformed about how the flag is what it really means.
All right, this kid's been having his hand up for a long time.
Okay. I really just want to bring there have been a lot of. I don't want to say personal. I want to say more of opinion attacks on both sides, and I really want to bring it back to the center, to what the conversation's all about.
Now, in the previous video, you heard the gentleman in the black shirt with writing on it say that he was able to talk to a military educator who told him that his teachers were biased. When I tell y'all the indoctrination runs deep, the indoctrination runs deep. Because even when your children are going off to school, how do you further your point? You find someone that they trust, that they're going to respect. And if you notice that white supremacy, racism, goes hand in hand with bootlicking the military, bootlicking police. So who better to talk to your children and further give these thoughts to? That's why this gentleman is so in a classroom with teachers, plural, telling people that they're misinformed. Did you see him glitch when asked about the free labor of slavery that went into the profitability of the South? But yet the argument is it will hurt our children's feelings to learn the real history of the United States and to incorporate CRT into grades K through 12, to teach about anybody that's not white, straight, Christian, and male, saving the planet. But your children, white people, can sit in a classroom and tell non-white children that if you're hurt or offended by my words, my actions, or the paraphernalia I bring about, oh well. It's not about hurt feelings. It's about upholding the legacy of white supremacy. It's about spackling the foundation of systemic oppression within this nation. White folks are turning their children into their apprentices to make sure that that foundation remains strong and intact. And see, this way of thinking, this way of, I know better than the teacher, because at home, this is what's told to me 101 times with nothing to back it up. No books, no journals, no nothing. Yeah, I see your facts over there. I see your facts over there, but no. My mama said I don't have to look at it. My daddy said I don't have to look at it. My parents' friends said I don't have to look at it. But you really think that the teachers can convince your children of something? That the teachers can turn your children liberal? No. Even David Duke had to learn this hard lesson because his own son, when he got off to college, what changed his mind was his interactions with people. When he stopped talking over people. And he realized everything that he was told was a lie. But let's keep going.
Of like opinion attacks on both sides, and I really want to bring it back to the center, to like what the conversation is all about. And you know, I was born in Chicago, but I could not have more Confederate blood in me. I'm directly related to Jefferson Davis. I had great uncles and grandfathers who died in that war, and slave owning, and I just really genuinely think that there are just better ways to represent what those people stood for, because not all of them owned slaves. As it was stated before, a lot of the war was fought by people who weren't rich. Not all of these people had, owned plantations. A lot of the people who died in that war weren't slave owners, whether or not they believed in slavery. And so, I think that there are better symbols for what those people died for than the Confederate flag.
I think I kind of just want to get back to like the Native American thing. So when we made the American flag, it was after we took land from the Native Americans, so that flag does not directly relate to the Native Americans we took land for. You have the 50 stars to represent the 50 states. When you have the Confederate flag, that directly relates to the fact that they believe in slavery and they seceded from the North. So you can't put two and two together and try to make a valid argument because that doesn't make sense.
But the American flag symbolizes America, and what America started out as was the colonies, and as we expanded westward, we took land, and the American flag symbolizes America as a whole, and America as a whole does encompass a lot of Native American land. And to get to America that we had today, we had to take a ton of Native American land. And what I was trying to get to the point.
America is our continents. The flag of the United States does not even encompass everyone, and it goes further than Native Americans. And to have a grasp on the fact that you stole it and that you couldn't create this land without stealing it is a problem. Is a problem that at such a young age you're comfortable with saying. Because how much you want to bet if somebody stole his iPhone and said, hey, it's for the greater good, we're going to create this, that, and the other, he wouldn't go for that. See the separation, the constant separation. And even, unfortunately, the Black students in this class are not realizing that they are not encompassed under the flag nor the anthem. And then you hear the young man who says that he's a descendant of the Confederacy. And he's like, there's a better way to represent who they were traitors. They were treasonous. You only believe that they were heroic and they were iconic and legendary because of the rewriting and the propaganda put forth by the Daughters of the Confederacy and many other legacy organizations throughout the country that will be white through and through. And then he goes on to say many of the people who fought in the war were not slave owners. No, many of them were slaves. And you want to know why? Because there was a draft. And guess who could get out of the draft? Wealthy people. Slave owners. They could pay a replacement tax. They would pay a fee and somebody else would have to go. And that's not the only time that that has occurred. Because there's an infamous time that it occurred that caused the Irish to attack Black people, as if Black people had anything to do with the rule that was coming down from the federal government. But what better way to show people that you're white and deserve to be at their table than making their enemy your enemy as well? So that whole argument, there are people who fought for it to uphold it. No, there are a lot of people who fought in these wars because they didn't have a choice. And there were people who fought in the Civil War because they earnestly wanted to hold on to slaves. There were people who were a part of abolitionist societies that held slaves and did not want to free their own slaves. I've said it before, let me say it again. There are a lot of white people whose sole focus is how they will look in history books, not how they live currently. If you think I'm joking, look at today. Look at the politicians of today that will tout Christian family values and have more open affairs than one can count or keep up with. Politicians that'll say, oh, I'm for the people. Look at this bill I'm putting out. But when you actually look at the bill, it has a great catchy name that'll make you think that they're helping people. But really, they've made a new way for donors. The lobbyists have a little bit more leeway. They've given themselves a raise. But the title, they know the title is what will be put in that history book. And most people won't take the time to look up that legislation. They'll give you a great soundbite that will be quoted over and over again, but very few people will look it up to get the full context. It's about perception, not really giving a damn about anyone. And this all, we need to find a better way to honor them and what they stood for. They stood for owning and abusing other people. They started by trying to enslave the Native Americans after the Native Americans were benevolent enough to keep them alive because they couldn't keep themselves alive. The Native Americans were benevolent enough to forgive them, even though they brought great destruction and disease to them. But then they realized they could not work the Native Americans as they could others. So they started the business of hiring mercenaries to go steal Black people from all over the continent of Africa, to the point where royalty of Africa had to write letters begging them to stop. And they talk so much about this heritage over hate. Then stop lying about your heritage. Stop trying to combat the truth by saying your people sold you. Well, you know, the Irish. No, if it's heritage, stand on it. Stop trying to disassociate yourself from pieces of it. Stop trying to volley the ball of accountability into somebody else's court. If it is your heritage, be proud of all of it. Stand on it and scream it from the rooftops that you come from a long line of thieves and murderers. Say it with your chest. Be proud of it. Fight for telling the truth about your own people just as hard as you fight to say the N-word. Well, let's keep going. We got 2 more videos after this.
Saying that you feel that most people feel really offended by it is really bad, but the fact that you want to make someone change their views and take down their opinions because you can't control your emotions over a certain subject is really immature.
Wait, go ahead. Wait, go ahead.
And there you have it. Our lived experience, our actual history isn't a perspective, isn't a truth. It's emotion. Then he threw the trope in there that we can't control. Not taking a responsibility, not have respect for another person. Because phenotypically, if we were to say something derogatory about his family lineage and brought in regalia that's triggering to him and his heritage, and was a constant reminder of how people viewed his lineage, it would be a time for understanding. It would be another hashtag never forget. But knowingly upholding symbols of slavery, of immense atrocities, we must not speak about. But 9/11, speak about it. Holocaust, haul them in. Even if they're 167 years old, put them on trial. We got to do that. But you can steal land from the Native Americans. You can steal bodies from Black people and Native Americans. And everybody's supposed to shh. It's just your emotions.
I was just gonna say that, I mean, going off of like what Mike said about, you know, I'm just here and Jack. Okay. About what Jack said about how they're just like here to like support their First Amendment right. I don't think that we're saying that like, yes, it's your First Amendment right. We're not disagreeing with that. We're not saying, oh, you can't like do your First Amendment right. I think we're just saying that it's like it's
Okay.
Yeah. The look of defeat in the last clip, because nobody was completely going along with it. But you see how they're fighting to preserve their First Amendment right. They're not fighting to preserve the dignity and the well-being of fellow citizens, but they're patriots. And we're supposed to all come together and unify and not be segregated, but be integrated. How can you unify with someone who believe that only they have rights and their rights are to be protected? That you can't be offended by anything they say or do. But you have to respect them taking offense when you talk about being hurt, denigrated, dehumanized, hunted, placed as the underrungs of society. Now, we know everybody is not going to change their way of thinking, but one thing we know is that very few will completely stand on it publicly. That's why they get so offended when being called racist. They don't want to be attached to it, but they still need a sense of feeling better than. They scream unity when really all they have in their heart is competition and clawing their way up to a point where they can look down their nose at someone else. So that's why every couple of years, they use the same playbook and pretend that they're giving a member of the oppressed a seat at their table so that they can see their words work in a manner that they can't do out of their hueless lips. That's why they love to bring a member of the Coontastic Coalition next to them and spat out against Black people because they know that sting is different. And they can come in and pat them on the back and go, look, see, this one of the good ones. They agree with me. They're saying all of that. And then they use that same playbook against the trans community, that same playbook against the gay community, that same playbook against drag queens, that same playbook against the Asian community, that same playbook. Yeah. But then turn around when we complain and go, things need to change. And they need to change from the base of how we educate one another on what has actually happened. Then it's no, that's division. That's division. No segregation here. No. We need to come together. We got to stick together. You don't want to stick together. Not with us. You barely want to stick together with each other. But I will see you all later on tonight with Get Into It with Taz and Chris. And as always, each one teach one, each one reach one. Till next time.